So this week I'm up and away on holidays in deepest darkest Australia visiting my siblings, so we thought we might take a look at something just a little bit less current than usual. With the end of Superman and Lois last December and the looming release of James Gunn's Superman this July, we thought it might be fun to take a look at the recent live-action televisual take on the Man of Steel. In particular, what makes Superman and Lois stand out from the other adaptations of the Big Blue Boy Scout. This will involve spoilers for all 4 seasons, but if you've had the show on your watch list, you've had plenty of time to catch up by now. So dude, with all that in mind, let's take a look at what makes this take on the iconic character so super, man.
Say, Jim, boom!
Excuse me.
That's a bad outfit!
Across the 4-season run of Superman and Lois, there's a recurring preoccupation with the importance of watches. For example, it's the subject of a monologue by supervillain Thaddeus or Kilgrave during the first season.
Einstein saw time as an illusion, one that gets us to wear a watch.
During a routine prison transfer, he makes a point of asking his guards for the time.
Nice piece. And analog. Good for you.
Then in the show's 3rd season, on the way to her first chemotherapy session to treat her cancer, Lois is gifted a watch by her daughter from another universe, Natalie.
This is a reminder that we're here for you.
These are small scenes, but they fit within the larger thematic framework of Superman and Lois. More than most comic book adaptations, Superman and Lois is very conscious of the passage of time. Indeed, the series marks that passage of time in a number of ways, most obviously with its emphasis on death. The first season, for example, begins with Lois and Clark moving their family back to Smallville following the death of Clark's adoptive mother, Martha Kent. Then, the first season ends with another sort of death, the destruction of the holographic representation of Clark's biological father, Jor-El, with the remains of the crystal that housed his consciousness buried beneath a tree on the Kent farm. That tree also comes to serve as the final resting place of Lois's father, General Sam Lane, after he passes away early in the show's final season. These deaths are tragic, but they're also inevitable. They're a reminder that time stops for no Superman. Throughout Superman and Lois, trouble arises from characters who refuse to accept the passage of time and the inevitability of mortality. The first season features 2 refugees from different dying worlds who act monstrously in their attempts to mitigate that destruction. John Henry Irons, for example, arrives from a world where he was married to Lois, a world destroyed by an evil version of Superman. Irons plans to prevent that from happening by killing Superman before he can turn evil.
We need to stop Kal-El before he does to this world what he did to mine.
Similarly, the primary antagonist of that first season is the Kryptonian Tal-Rho, who plans to restore Krypton by destroying Earth, using humanity as the raw material to resurrect his people.
I came here with one purpose, to further our Kryptonian heritage. Krypton will finally be resurrected.
In the 3rd season, crime boss Bruno Mannheim refuses to accept the terminal cancer diagnosis that his wife Pia has received.
You just need more of the cure.
It's over. Bruno, you can't save me.
Mannheim so steadfastly refuses to accept the inevitability of his wife's death that he embarks upon a series of experiments that almost destroy the city of Metropolis.
It's okay to let go!
Across the 3rd and 4th seasons, Superman is confronted with the monstrous Doomsday, an iconic Superman foe. However, this version of the character is a version of Clark from another alternate world. This version of Clark cannot die, but every time that he comes back, he returns in a more monstrous form.
Every time you die, it just makes you stronger. Let me kill you, so nothing in this world can stop you. Ever. Nothing.
In the series finale, Superman shares a touching moment with his alternate self. Doomsday accepts the inevitability of his own destruction, letting Clark push him gently into the burning yellow sun. Clark himself has to come to terms with the idea of mortality, particularly in the 3rd and 4th seasons. In the 3rd season, Lois is diagnosed with cancer and Clark finds himself struggling to accept that she might die and that there is nothing he can do about it.
I find myself facing a problem that I can't do anything about. I have no idea what's gonna happen.
Superman can save the world, but he cannot stop death itself. Appropriately enough, given all of this, the classic comic book storyline, The Death of Superman, haunts Superman and Lois. Many of the supporting characters from that story, the replacement Superman, feature prominently in the show. John Henry Irons, for example, is the superhero known as Steel. Tal-Rho embraces the ancient Kryptonian weapon known as the Eradicator. In an alternate world, Clark's son Jonathan is styled as the Superboy from the Death of Superman storyline. When Doomsday kills Clark towards the end of the third season at the start of the fourth, it almost feels inevitable. Superman and Lois is in many ways about death, so doing a version of the Death of Superman was largely unavoidable. When Clark is resurrected midway through the fourth season, he's brought back with a human heart, and so he ages and eventually dies. The series finale of Superman and Lois ends with Superman dying for a second time, seemingly permanently, which is a bold choice for a character who, across media adaptations, is often treated as at least functionally immortal. In some ways, death is the ultimate marker of the passage of time, a reminder that everything ends. However, Superman and Lois marks the passage of time in other ways. The show is set rather late in Clark's career, and there's a strong emphasis on the idea that Lois and Clark have lived a life together. By the time the show begins, the pair have already put supervillain Lex Luthor in prison for nearly decades. They have 2 children, Jordan, Jonathan, and Jonathan. These characters have histories. They are defined by their pasts. Lois is still haunted by a miscarriage early in their marriage, a daughter that she would have named Natalie.
You needed more time to process your grief.
I used my vacation days. I allowed myself the time.
Tal-Rho is actually Superman's biological half-brother, as Superman's mother, Lara Lor-Van, had a separate family before she married Jor-El. This theme of complicated, evolving, dynamic family units extends to Smallville. Lana Lang and Kyle Cortez divorce halfway through the show, and each goes on to start their own distinct family unit. Superman and Lois marks the passage of time through the lives of these characters. At the start of the show's second season, Lana and Kyle's daughter Sarah acknowledges that it didn't feel the same going back to the summer camp that she had previously loved.
It was good to be there. It just felt a little different as a counselor.
At the start of the third season, Jonathan is literally a new man, and he's learning how to drive. In the show's final season, as Clark comes to terms with his newfound mortality, he even finds his hair turning gray.
Oh, Clark.
What?
Is that what you've been doing in there, dyeing your hair?
Throughout Superman and Lois, history rhymes. Clark remembers using his powers to save Lana from a car accident during their high school days, and Jordan ends up doing the exact same thing for Sarah decades later. When Clark has a near-fatal heart attack in the series finale, he's not the only Kent man to suffer that ailment in that exact location.
The irony is, it was almost exactly where my dad died.
Still, these repetitions are a reminder of time's passage. The past shapes the characters, but it need not trap them. In this context, it feels very deliberate that the defining trait of Superman and Lois's take on Superman's arch-nemesis Lex Luthor is Luthor's refusal to accept that passage of time. At the end of the third season, Luthor is released from prison and seeks to avenge himself upon Lois, as her reporting put him behind bars. Luthor is motivated by the loss of that time.
17 years of my life gone! My daughter, she was 14. Now she won't talk to me.
Midway through the final season, Clark and Lois stage a reunion between Luthor and his estranged daughter Elizabeth. Elizabeth is pregnant. Luthor is going to be a grandfather. Elizabeth makes her father an ultimatum. If he can let go of the past and embrace the present, he can be part of their lives. However, to do this, Luthor needs to let go of his vendetta against Lois.
Lois Lane took 17 years of my life.
Which you could never get back.
There has to be a price.
Not if you want to be in my life. Or your grandson's.
Luthor naturally refuses. He cannot and will not change. At one point, Lois is asked whether Luthor has moved on from Smallville. Lois ironically notes,
I don't think Lex Luthor is someone who can ever really move on.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
This emphasis on the passage of time, the inevitability of change, and the inescapability of death is very interesting in the context of an adaptation of an iconic and beloved comic book character. After all, comic book characters are sort of frozen in a perpetual now, with a sliding timescale in mainstream comics. Clark Kent is not much older than he was when he was introduced in 1938. In the comics, time is an illusion, both literally in the medium's use of static imagery, and conceptually in its understanding of the flow of time. The nature of comic books is they're built around iconography, and so they tend to crystallize. There have been significant changes to comic book continuity over time, but more often than not, these changes are temporary and default back to factory settings, so they can offer readers what Stan Lee allegedly described as the illusion of change. For example, in the comics, Superman's marriage to Lois has been both erased from continuity and subsequently restored. This is one of the challenges in adapting comic books into media like film and television. Actors age and die. Time passes. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has struggled with this reality, broaching the topic as early as Age of Ultron.
Banner and I were doing research
That would affect the team.
that would end the team. Isn't that the mission? Isn't that the why we fight? So we can end the fight, so we get to go home?
But a thing isn't beautiful because it lasts.
Indeed, one of the central tensions of that shared universe in the wake of Endgame has been the push and pull between accepting the reality that time marches on and the impulse to play into pandering nostalgia by pretending that things never have to change. And while this was historically a major concern for comic books, it has increasingly become a concern for pop culture in general thanks to advances in deepfake technology and computer-generated imagery, which allows studios to both resurrect dead actors and to transport living actors back to the height of their fame, offering an uncanny replica of an imagined past. More and more pop culture, in particular more and more franchise entertainment, is increasingly about capturing these characters, and in particular these iterations of these characters, in amber, storing them at a certain moment in time. This may explain why so many recent franchise films go out of their way to kill off their leading characters, to offer something of a definitive statement, a full stop. Though of course, even that can't stop the big wheels of franchise entertainment spinning.
Fox killed him. Disney brought him back. They're gonna make him do this till he's 90.
It seems like pop culture is increasingly like Superman and Lois's take on Lex Luthor. It's unable to move on. In many ways, Superman and Lois is an extension of Zack Snyder's Superman trilogy. This is obvious in the show's sepia-tinted cinematography, its early interest in Superman's relationship to the American military-industrial complex, its depiction of post-Great Recession American life, a planned colonization of Earth by Kryptonian survivors, and in Dan Romer's score. However, its interest in mortality and the passage of time is also an extension of one of the core themes of those three films. An understanding that Superman isn't about invoking some nostalgic past, but instead about finding a way to move forward. In Snyder's films, Superman serves as an inspiration. He saves Batman's soul. He inspires the creation of the Justice League. Zack Snyder's Justice League most obviously parallels Superman with Cyborg, echoing scenes like Superman's first flight, or the nostalgic promise that his lost world can be restored. Superman was a product of Great Depression America, and Zack Snyder's Justice League suggests that he might inspire another hero, perhaps more suited to the post-Great Recession era. But look, that's probably a whole other video. The point is that these stories are about Superman as an evolving idea. One of the challenges facing Superman as a character is the urge that some creators feel to assert his perpetual relevance and to insist that he is truly timeless and ageless.
It ain't broke, so don't fix it.
That Superman always has been and always will be a perfect ideal. This take can appear reactionary and defensive at times.
Am I so out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
It's an argument that flatters Superman fans, but doesn't make a convincing case for the character. Part of the beauty of Superman and Lois is that it makes a much more interesting and compelling argument for the enduring appeal and necessity of the Man of Steel. In Superman and Lois, Superman is not an abstraction who exists frozen in time, like his undead body in the Fortress of Solitude in the wake of Doomsday's murder of the hero.
She placed him in an altered state of existence. It's how the Kryptonians rehabilitate their criminals, by placing them into suspended animation.
Instead, Superman is a living, breathing, and changing concept. When Lois dies of cancer, Superman can't just fly really fast around the world backwards and roll back time to prevent it from happening. When Clark's identity becomes public knowledge, he can't just use a kiss of forgetting or fly really fast counterclockwise around the world again, depending on which cut of Superman 2 you think I'm referencing here. Instead, the Man of Steel has to move forward. a hero who defines himself as
faster than a speeding bullet
and
more powerful than a locomotive
needs to be able to move with the world around him. It's worth reflecting on the final line from the show's run, delivered by Superman himself.
Life, it goes by so fast.
This is a mission statement for the series as a whole. Life does move fast. And even with super speed, Superman and Lois understands that a key part of Superman's strength comes from being able to keep up with it. I've been Darren Mooney, and this was The Backdrop.